Will my committee members take their seats, please? Calling to order the meeting of the Health and Family Services Committee, 11:30.
Mrs. Geiger.
Here.
Ms. Vedder. Mr. Ruiz.
Here.
Mrs. Edwards.
Here.
Mrs. Labuda.
Okay, in the interest of time, on the agenda, we are going to move through the reports. We have several reports that need to take place. And I will ask those that are giving reports to please be brief. Okay, the first one, number one, is a standing report. It's a monthly report on the HEAL grant update at the Adult Care Center. And I believe our interim administrator, is she here?
If you don't want to go that far, right here is good.
Welcome to your first report.
Microphone's not on, Cory. Your microphone's not on.
Okay, well, I think I can talk loud. Is that loud enough?
Well, your mic should be on there.
Why don't you?
It should be.
Hello?
Yeah, it's
Good.
If you would just introduce yourself and then give a brief update on the HEAL grant, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Debbie DeJesus. I'm the interim administrator with SCAC, and very pleased to have this opportunity to update you very briefly on the HEAL grant. We are presently in phase 1, working on the dementia unit, and having toured it, the progress is coming along nicely. Although we have run into a challenge with problem with showers and leaks. So we are presently working on a plan to be able to get the showers repaired so that we do not have leaks, so that the work that is being done will last us a long time in really good shape without the side effects of having leaks from up above. I would say that very briefly in terms of the plan, phase 1 being a closed dementia unit, and when we get to phase 2, we're going to have the short-term rehab and rehab in general updated, which will provide us with a wonderful opportunity to have up-to-date equipment so that we can be able to serve Sullivan County residents on the short-term needs, where they will come in, stay for a number of weeks, maybe a few months, get better, and then go home, some with services if needed.
The plan was
Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you, Debbie. I'm just going to ask my colleagues to refrain from any questions during these brief reports. If you have any, I'll ask for questions at the end. Thank you.
Subsequent to our Tuesday meeting, DPW with grants did submit a modified scope of work to the Department of Health. That has been submitted, so we are looking to include that shower renovation so we can continue to move the HEAL grant process forward. And we are actually meeting right after this to start the certificate of need application process to continue that work. So progress is being made. It's just a little slower than anticipated.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay, I'd like a brief update on the housing tour. We have taken a tour in Delaware County and looked at their housing model. Currently, Sullivan County has housed their homeless in the motels, and we're looking at models to try to change that. So I'll ask Commissioner Parker to give an update.
We had also been asked at the last committee meeting to come with some data. We do have that data today, that information that if Giselle is here, we could hand it out to the committee members and just review it. There's good information, good news in that data. But as far as the housing, we did put the request request for information or request for qualifications out there to the community. I believe the Sullivan County Board of Realtors have received it. We're going to help us in disseminating the information, and we're awaiting responses. We also looked at several properties that were going to possibly be available in the upcoming tax auction. We did identify one property, a potential two-family residence for homeless families, two families to house. So we really wanted to do a pilot project with a county-owned property, and then also look at engaging into leases with local property owners to house the homeless. But can we take the time today to hand out that information that Giselle has, we can do a real brief presentation on it?
Thank
Is
you.
that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
If she's here yet?
Giselle?
She's okay.
Thank you. Do you have one for each of the
Yeah.
committee members?
Yes.
Yeah,
And there are extras for them.
okay, thank you.
Is this document number 2 coming through now? Or is this the same one?
Do you have three, Giselle?
There's two
Okay.
sets of information. One is the one you received, and then the second should be 4 pages, which is going around now. It's just a 4 pages. So 4. Yeah, everybody will have. It should be 4. And everyone got 4 at a time.
That's all we have?
There are 4 pages on the second document, so that's the document you have. You want to take all 4?
Oh, there's 4.
This is one pack.
Oh, okay.
This is one pack. That's one.
You should have one that says current data on homeless families and single adults, May 31st, 2013.
Family and single?
And then there is a visual. That is a
So
4-page.
in total, we have 4 pages.
5 pages.
No,
Okay, and Giselle, being that it is data that we'll need to review, could you just give us a brief summary?
Sure.
Thank
sure.
you.
No problem. The first one that's current data on homeless families and single adults dated May 31st, 2013. Those are real numbers starting March 31st, so it's March 1st to May 31st. The front is a bar graph that's broken down, just to give you a visual. On the back are the total.
What page are you on?
I'm on, it says current data on homeless families.
Gotcha.
Okay, and that is a snapshot of March, it says March 31st, April. It does say April 20th on there, it should be April 30th and May 31st. So those are the last 3 months. The front is a bar graph, just to give you a visual of where our numbers are. The back actually gives you the actual numbers. And we broke it up by total family, breaking it down into 1-parent and 2-parent household, as well as total adults in family, and then total children in family, and giving you also total singles, male and female. When you look at the decrease, we've also given you 5 reasons as to why there has been a significant decrease. Those are listed. Do you want me to go through them? Or you- No, okay. And those are listed so that you can see some of the things that the examiners have been doing and some of the controls that we have in place that are actually helping reduce those numbers. That's that form, okay? The other 4, that's just a snapshot of 2008 to the present. And those are numbers that are reported to the state on the 15th of every month. So that just gives you, get a general of the last 5 years in a bar graph form, so you can visually see where our numbers are. And
Okay, I
that's
think
all
it's
from-
really significant data, and I appreciate you putting this together because it's obvious that currently, out of the 150 total homeless, they're currently housed in motels, is that correct?
Well, the current number is actually 84 that are homeless. If you look at the May 31st.
Okay, so that's
our
the date.
current. So current right now is 84, with total families being 13 and total singles being 42.
So in March, it was 150, and currently it's down to 80, and your reasons for the decrease are listed on the back.
Correct.
And there are actions that you took in family services to decrease the numbers.
Yes, the entire team.
Okay. Thank you,
Okay.
Giselle. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the CDT, which is the Community Day Treatment Program update, and that's Joe Todoro, Commissioner of Community Services.
Good morning, folks. Just to give you a brief update, we're at the point now where the provider who is looking to open the personal recovery-oriented services program has put in their application to the state. The state asked for some additional information. That information has been submitted. We have talked with Monica and our insurers to talk about what we would need to do to make sure that this all works out appropriately. They seem to be okay with the direction that we're taking, and we're at the point now where we need to draft a contract to share with our underwriters as well as the Office of Mental Health so that we can get feedback from them so we may move forward with this.
So the state has the information, and they're currently reviewing the information
No,
to
what
make-
they're waiting for now, actually, they're reviewing the resubmission of some of the questions that they had for the vendor. So, and that looks like it's all good. But we need to start drafting our contract with the vendor and put those things into place so that our underwriter as well as the state can look at that
So
contract.
what's the time frame on that?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is Gerald Dietz here? He can give us a brief report on the fraud unit.
Today, as of today's date, we have 21 arrests, where we have a number of cases with the police departments and the state police also that will give us a few more arrests in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. We're also working on a plan to try to arrest as many of the deadbeat dads as possible. We have 32 child support warrants. That's it.
I want to thank you, Jerry, for your work. My brother is disabled. My goal in setting up the fraud unit was to ensure that our Medicaid dollars are going to our needy and not to fraud, waste, or abuse. So I thank you for your work. Thank you. And we'll have a brief update on our Office of the Aging RSVP Senior of the Year banquet from Karen Matthews.
Thank you. We had our luncheon, our 40th annual luncheon at the Villa Roma in the midst of snow and sleet on May 14th. And we had a total of about 205 people who showed up out of the 305 current volunteers to the county. Our volunteers served approximately 55,000 hours for this current year that we just went through, and we're looking to our 41st year for more hours from our volunteers. Currently, we had 9 seniors of the year for each district, for each legislative district, and 1 senior of the year for Sullivan County, and her name is Sophia Martinek, and she is the Cornell Cooperative Extension / AARP Tax Coordinator. So I'm not sure what else you'd like to hear.
Well, I'm just so proud of all the seniors. Thank you for your work with the program.
It is a wonderful program, and it serves many thousands of seniors in Sullivan County that would not qualify or be able to receive services if the volunteers did not do the great job that they do. We thank
Excellent
them.
program. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anything from my colleagues on the reports? Can we move into the presentation?
I have one question. Even though I'm not on this committee, I'd like to know on the homeless families and single adults data, Are we working with the Veterans Service Office with homeless veterans?
I don't know if we are or not. I'm relatively new. It's definitely something we'd be open to. You know, I can't give you that information.
It's absolutely a good recommendation
Yes.
from Jean Benson, so if you could hook up with the Veterans Office
Yes.
and have dialogue with them, that would be good. Thank you, Jean.
Cindy, just an observation with the fraud investigators report there. I think it was a good move in putting that position in place. There seems to be much more activity there. I don't recall much happening over the last, 4 or 5 years on that front. So I think it's good that we're addressing that issue so that the resources go to the people who are most in need.
Thank you, Alan. Okay, if there's nothing further, I'd like to start the presentation on the Adult Care Center. I've asked William McDonald to come from Tosky and Company and give us a financial report.
Thank you. Yeah, that's fine.
Yep.
Who knew an audit would draw such a crowd?
We wish the meetings were like this every month.
All right, well, thank you for having me. I'm going to give a brief overview of the 2012 financial statement audit, where reimbursement is going for skilled nursing facilities, and some of the challenges county facilities are facing. Just as a little bit of background, we do about 80 to 85 skilled nursing facilities and adult care facilities as part of our work. It's a good mix of private, for-profit, and government. And we've done some work helping some counties who want to privatize, some who want to say, what can we do to stay in the business and do it better? So we've got a good mix of background and understanding on the subject. So what I passed out is the financial statement. It is a clean, unqualified opinion. It's the best we have to offer. Page 2 and 3 is the report that talks about that and some of the new standards we have for this year, but there's nothing out of the ordinary. It is, like I said, the best we have to offer, no major issues. If you flip to page 3, it's your statement of net position. In the for-profit world, people call this your balance sheet, so if you're more familiar with that term. Just wanted to highlight a few numbers on here. The cash balance was up about $1 million from the previous year. The accounts receivable was down about $100,000, and we do some calculations to see where you're at with that, and we saw that it's about 60 days outstanding in accounts receivable. That's a good level for what we see in the industry. It's actually down from 68 days in the prior year, so that's a good trend. We like to see that number of days decrease, so that means you're getting the cash in the door faster. On the liability section, you have manageable debt load. The biggest things that really stand out on this side of it are the due to county funds. The county has, at this point, continued to contribute to the adult care facility and send money as needed. That shows up here in about the $5.8 million number. About 5 years ago, there was a change in the classification where you had to show your OPEB. This is basically your post-retirement benefits. There's a large number there for about $7.1 million if you combine the short-term and long-term portion. Overall, your net position is a negative $10 million, but I like to kind of put this in perspective. You've got the money that's due to the county, and you've got the OPEB, which is relatively new. If you took those two things out, you'd be in a positive $2 million position. Now,
Could you restate that?
Okay. Within the last few years, there's due to county, which has grown, and I'm not trying to minimize that. And there's also this other post-employment benefit number. So what you have is two numbers that are, one's under your control, the due to county. You can consider that a subsidy, or you can consider it a liability. So far, it's been considered a liability. And the OPEB, which came into play a few years ago where it had to be shown on your balance sheet, it's basically been funded as a pay-as-you-go rather than fully funding the plan going forward. That is consistent with what we see in just about every other county. But if you take those two things out, you're in a positive $2 million situation, and that kind of just puts into perspective, okay, what's within your control, what are you doing? By no stretch am I trying to say this is a rosy financial position, but it is two things I like to put in context when you're at least evaluating this page. That was all I had for page 3. I'm going to move on to page 4, and I'll take any questions at the end. Page 4, there was about 88% occupancy for the year. I know with this new HEAL grant money and some of the things, we're hoping past 2014 and beyond that occupancy will get back up there to generate more revenue. Overall, total operating revenues were up about $600,000 from 2011. The expense side of things, we were very pleased to see that it was pretty consistent with the prior year, and you actually were holding the line or cutting expenses in most areas. The employee benefit one is one of the things that's outside of your control. That factors into the increase in the employment benefit plan and your required pension contributions. So if you took out the increase in that line item, you would actually had a decrease in your expenses from the previous year. Down a little bit lower, you'll see the IGT. That's money that comes from first the state, or the feds to the state, to the county, and then to the facility. I expect that to be in play for at least the next 5 years. That's one of those things that people talk about going away from time to time. That is money, $2.8 million that did come in for 2012.
Intergovernmental transfer?
Correct.
So are you hearing that that's going to be limited in any way?
I'm not hearing any limitations. I'm hearing, they're extending it for maybe another 5-year period, and then they always revisit it from there. It's always subject to change based on the state's financial circumstances. I like to throw that little caveat in there, but generally they've been consistent when they said they're going to keep it around for a foreseeable future.
Can I also ask a question with regards to their level of transfer, whether it's consistent or not? Because obviously it's changed about $200,000. Is that based on a statewide formula, or is it based on occupancy?
It's based on a statewide formula, and what they do is they calculate all the beds for all county facilities in the state, and they set the pool of money that's available, and the number of beds you have in service is how your pro rata amount gets allocated.
And with regards to, state policy, it appears as though the state wants to get out of the adult care business, and we are, to a certain extent, an arm of the state. So what would we have to do as a county if we said we want a public facility to be our priority? We would have to change the way we do business right now?
There's always the uncertainty in the business. The state, as you mentioned, is going to move towards more of a managed care type reimbursement system, which means they're going to kind of push the responsibility out to private insurers, and they're going to come and negotiate contracts with you. Expect to see that anywhere from the next 2 to 5 years, depending on when the state gets their act together and is ready to fully implement that. Could be a little bit sooner. They wanted to push it sooner. I just don't see it happening. It's going to come down to a point in time where how much of a subsidy does the tax base handle, and that's what this group and your constituents have to figure out. In the county nursing home arena, I think there's going to be a need to be a subsidy for just about every county we've seen going forward, so I hope that's no surprise. It's just, what is your threshold for paying if you want to be in this business? Does that answer your question?
I think I don't want to hold the thing up. I think we're going to have a special session just looking at the different options going forward, because other counties who maintain commitment to public health have gone to the LVC model, and we all know that the private facilities, they consider profit to be the most important factor, so that would mean that they would only take certain cases that will keep that profit margin there. And we need to make a decision if this is what's happening on the state level. What are our options going forward, and what would that actually mean? So hopefully we can do that.
Sure, well, there's more time, I'd love to come back. I mean, it's no surprise, if you did a Freedom of Information Act request. We are the auditor's record for Ulster County, just to your north too, and they're going through some transition. We do Saratoga. I've done some work for Albany County. We did Delaware before they went private, probably 7, 8 years ago now. So, I'd be happy to schedule some time that would be beneficial for this group to get a full range of information.
Thank you.
Page 5 is your cash flow statement. Just a few numbers I wanted to point out here. The about 6th line down, net cash flow from operating activities was a negative $2 million. Generally like to see that number a little bit closer to break even, but in the government setting, this isn't a bad picture comparatively. The one thing I also noticed is the purchase of capital assets. That's one way to save money in the short term, but if you're not putting money back into your facility in the long term, you're going to have problems. Generally, I like to see you're matching your depreciation expense. Depreciation for this year was $304,000. We bought new assets worth $107,000. I know this HEAL renovation will be a big part going forward, but just one of those things we see in the industry that I like to point out. I won't bore you with all the details of the footnotes. I'll let you read them and be available for any questions if you have them. There are a few new ones, but nothing that materially changed your presentation from previous years. There is full disclosure on the retirement benefits and the post-employment benefits. And that's all I had. In your packet, you also have a letter separating, a blue piece of paper separating a letter that's required communication. Just wanted to take a step back and give you my 10,000-foot view. The team here was very cooperative. We don't have any management letter comments that we would be required to present to this board in terms of areas where we feel there was deficiencies or material weaknesses. There were a few control type things that we made some recommendations on, but nothing that was elevated to those levels where we thought it needed to be brought to the attention of this group. The team.
Thank you.
Sure.
Just so that we're clear, this is just informational numbers that we asked the auditor to come down to provide more information for the legislature as we move forward. With the fiscal challenges at the Adult Care Center, we are looking at every area to try to bridge that financial gap that we have. So I just wanted to make that clear.
And you are in much better shape than a lot of counties. As I said, that there's other ones out there that have $10, $12 million losses, and that's being funneled from general fund or reserves to have to pay for that. So you're in a good position. You have a lot of back and forth in terms of the services that county employees provide that are paid by, the nursing facility staff. So there's a nice mix here in the relationship that exists.
Priscilla will be happy to hear that.
Thank you. I think it's obvious that there is a gap. We're trying to get as close as we can so that, the burden on the taxpayer is not, continuing to be tremendous. Thank you. Any questions from my colleagues?
We really appreciate your time coming out.
Thank you.
And now we have homework, so please everyone take it home and read it. Okay, second presentation, early intervention preschool program, and I believe Carol Ryan was going to, Lisa Wisman, or I'm sorry, Carol is away. Is Lisa here?
She's coming.
She's coming.
Oh, thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the early intervention preschool program with all of you. As you are aware, all babies and toddlers develop at different levels at different times. However, there are certain specific milestones that we expect each child to meet at certain stages in their life. When they fail to meet those milestones, that's when our programs are so very important. So when we're dealing with a child from birth to 3 years of age, and they fail to meet certain developmental milestones, we would refer them to our early intervention program. It's a program designed to treat children with developmental delays and disabilities and diagnose conditions so that we can provide them with services that will increase their rate of development to their typically functioning peers. It's a service that's provided at no cost to families. We can provide those services anywhere in the home, within the community, and it's a voluntary program for the parents unless family court is involved, and then family court can order their participation in the program. And as I mentioned, it's a developmental program, not a medical model program. We can offer those children services such as speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy. We can provide them with a special instructor or a special ed teacher. We provide vision therapy, audiological therapy if the child is deaf, social work, psychological services, adaptive equipment, wheelchairs, sitting equipment, speaking devices, hearing aids, orthotics. And we can also provide the family with much needed respite in certain cases if they're overwhelmed for the care of the child. In order to be eligible for the program, every child must undergo an evaluation, and that evaluation is conducted by a team of professionals, and they look at the 5 areas of the child's development. We would look at their adaptive skills, their cognitive skills, communication skills, physical skills, as well as their social and emotional skills. We use a play-based therapy evaluation, meaning that our therapists actually play with the child to determine whether or not they reach a certain standard of delay. And typically those evaluations are done again in the natural environment. We do that right in the home. In order to be eligible, a child must have a diagnosed condition or meet the standards set by the state, which in layman's terms is a 33% delay in one area of their development or 25% delay in two areas of their development. If that occurs, then we can put into place a plan in those specific areas where there are delays to help them increase their skills in that area to reach typically developing peer levels. If they're not eligible for the program, we spend a lot of time with the family telling them how to reach out to the community and find services within the community that may be available to them. Maybe they can use their health insurance to receive services through speech therapy or physical therapy through their health insurance. We put them into support groups, play groups with other peers. We can also put them into what we call the Child Find program, which is a component of the early intervention program, but it monitors those children who are at high risk of developing a developmental delay. And with that program, we provide nursing screenings at 6 and 24 months, and we provide ASQs to the family, which is ages and stages questionnaires. It's a developmental tool where the parents are asked specific questions at 6 and 24 months is the nursing screening, 12, 18, and 30 months is the ASQ, this ages and stages questionnaire. It's a program that helps to identify children along the way, because maybe when that first time when that child is evaluated, they're not eligible, but their concerns continue to exist, and we can monitor them to make sure we catch them in time to provide them with the services that they need. Who would you refer them to? Which program should you refer them to? We always ask that question of people so that they know what department to look for, what program to look for. If a doctor or a pediatrician, nurse, or CPS investigator is looking and they see concerns in a child, we tell them to refer them directly to early intervention. However, if they have no concerns but the family is at risk, say they're homeless as discussed before, or the mother is very young, we've identified those children as children who tend to have developmental delays later on in life. So we would put them into the Child Find program to monitor them along the way. If a child is over the age of 3, we have the preschool special education program, and that program works with the Committee for Preschool Special Education at each school district. It looks for educational needs rather than developmental delays. It's also a service provided at no cost to the family in the home or most natural environment for the child. And it also is a voluntary program where if this child is found eligible but the family feels that they don't want the service, they can refuse to have services put into place, again, unless it's court ordered by family court. These children also have to go through an evaluation process to determine their eligibility. The difference in this evaluation is that each child must have what we call a social history, a background on the family and the child's development, as well as a psychological evaluation where we're testing for the child's cognitive potential. And then we compare that to an evaluation in the developmental area where there's a concern for the child. So it might be a speech eval or a PT eval, occupational therapy eval. They are also play-based, but these evals can take place at either a facility or in the home with the child. The criteria is very similar. They need to have a 33% delay in one area or a 25% delay in two areas. We do divide up speech, the communication area, in this component. So whereas in early intervention, if they have a speech delay, it's a combined score. So a lot of children don't receive speech that may be eligible then at the preschool level. Again, we offer PT, speech, OT, vision therapy. The one biggest difference in this program is we offer center-based preschool programs for those children that are globally delayed. With that, we can offer one-to-one aids if the child is extremely difficult to handle, and we also do provide transportation for those children to the program, whether it be parent transportation or the county paying for a bus to transport that child. How are the programs paid for? First, I'd like to remind you that both these programs are federally mandated as well as state mandated, so we have no choice but to provide these services. Reimbursement is sought through, for the early intervention program, we seek reimbursement from third-party health insurance as well as Medicaid, and then any component that goes unpaid is reimbursed by 49% from the state, 51% from the county government. In the preschool program, we are not allowed to bill third-party health insurance, but we can bill Medicaid for those children who are medically eligible. Any portion that is unpaid is reimbursed at 59.5% by the state education department, and the county pays the other 40.5%. Previously, in the year 2012, our last full calendar year, we served 362 children for early intervention, and we served a total of 402 children in the preschool special education program. And I just need to remind you again that these are our children, they're our future, and we're just striving to protect them and the well-being of their lives and for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. My daughter was in the early intervention program. It's an excellent, excellent program. The state, I understand, is reforming the EI program. It's a very costly program, and I believe there is a state takeover of the EI program coming up.
The state has, in fact, already taken over the provider contracts as of April 1st, 2013. So they will be handling the fiscal component of it. They will be, all the providers, instead of billing the municipalities, will be billing the state fiscal agent for reimbursement. Their hope is that with one state fiscal agent in place, that fiscal agent will have more success in billing third-party health insurance and will be able to bring in more revenue, thus lowering the cost to the state and the municipalities.
So what are the implications to the county going forward? We have 25 providers, is that correct?
With the state takeover, it opens up the state provider base. We can use any provider now within the state, within reason, of course. But it allows us to utilize any provider who might have a specialty in a certain area. The biggest, like I said, we hope to decrease the financial burden to the municipalities by having the fiscal agent billing the insurance companies, billing Medicaid, and then reimbursing the providers with the county paying for that through an escrow account.
Will the county have any oversight of, the fiscal end of it?
We continue to monitor our providers through their session notes, comparing their visits, because most of our providers service us for both preschool and early intervention, so we continue to audit, compare the preschool vouchers to the EI vouchers to make sure there's no overlap. The state has built in a system specifically just for the EI program to ensure that the providers aren't billing for more than one child at the same time, or more than one provider seeing the same child at one time. That system is in place with their fiscal agent. However, we continue to do in-house auditing, because they don't have the preschool component, so making sure that the preschool children aren't being billed for at the same time as the EI children.
So do you think you could get me that piece at some point of what the county's role will be in providing any oversight whatsoever? Because I'm also working in the transportation end and the state takeover through medical answering services, and there's difficulties there in keeping track of our mileage that the vendors are billing for. So is there a piece that we can have?
I can look into seeing what is available through the EI program. The transportation component is largely preschool, and we are not using the MAS at this point. We have a private contract.
Right, I understand that, but I was talking about transportation as a whole that the state oversees for the county. I have questions about the oversight that we don't have as,
We'll work on that. And I'll get back to
Okay,
you.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Lisa?
Yes.
I just wanted to follow up from Cindy's point with regards to that. First of all, I'd like to thank you for a very comprehensive report. Secondly, everyone that I've ever spoken to who has children in either of those two programs is always very grateful. They feel like that's made a big difference in their lives and the children's lives. So I just want to say that your work is, well regarded, and I'm sure you know that. And getting on from Cindy's concern with regards to transportation, are you involved in the transportation subcommittee meetings?
The subcommittee meetings, no.
Okay, I think it might, if you have a spare 25th hour in your day. We do have Martha Scappa's running the subcommittee on transportation. Veterans is involved, all of the different, the Office for the Aging, that's actually where she is, so that we can have a more comprehensive view on transportation issues as a rural county. As you know, it's almost out of balance, the cost of transportation sometimes is, it puts the costs of the service into a different ballgame altogether.
It's astronomical, yes.
So if you could, participate in that subcommittee, I think it'd
I'd
be
be
great.
interested, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Any further questions for Lisa? Okay, we're gonna move on to a discussion on public health restructure, the WIC program. We have some changes in personnel in public health, and I believe Commissioner Parker can give us a overview of what changes are proposed.
Well, we're sad to report that Carol Ryan has submitted her paperwork to retire from her position at Public Health. That will take effect at the end of July. Carol's dedication, she's even today at a meeting in Albany advocating on behalf of public health issues for Sullivan County residents. But as we've done across the division and looking at mandated and non-mandated programs within each department, we did begin to look at the WIC program, the Women, Infant, and Children program. The county currently has a 5-year contract that goes through October 31st, 2014. And because it's such an important program, we did begin a dialogue, I believe it was last week, with New York State Department of Health officials about what would occur if Sullivan County was no longer a provider of the WIC program or the services, since it is a non-mandated program for a local government unit, but an absolutely necessary and invaluable service. And in our dialogue, we learned that any such decision is the state would like to know as soon as possible. They would anticipate an 8 to 9 month transition. They would ask for our assistance in having discussions with local providers who possibly would be interested in being a WIC provider of service. For the past couple of years, Nancy, our deputy in public health, has served as our WIC coordinator, and with Carol Ryan's retirement, well-deserved upcoming retirement, we're trying to transition Nancy back into her position as deputy and working in that deputy capacity, which then will in turn necessitate the need for a WIC coordinator. With the future of WIC being unknown in terms of Sullivan County continuing as a provider, we obviously have to fill that position in one form or another, and the state did have a discussion with us about our different options. One option would be some form of management contract with a local organization to manage the WIC program, and or filling the position. The difficulty in filling a position would be possibly in a year and a half, we would no longer provide the service. So there have been discussions that are ongoing about that, coupled with upcoming decisions about filling Carol's position. Carol has not only served as the director, but has also served as the director of patient services in other health departments that typically is two separate positions. So in effect, Carol has really been doing 2 jobs and in some ways, serving in a dual capacity. We recently do have a retirement from the supervisor of nursing services, and so there has been discussion about, when Carol departs, about upgrading that position to a director of patient services, which is a nursing position, and depending on who replaces Carol, if that's a person with a nursing background or not, we would then need that director of patient services. So again, more discussion, dialogue, planning, and continuing to move it forward.
Thank you, Randy. The legislature will have decisions about these positions, and which ones will be filled and what direction we're gonna take. So I'm hoping to have a special meeting so that we can discuss the changes there. Any of my colleagues have any questions for Commissioner Parker?
I
Alan?
guess the memo that we received from Carol Ryan with the recommendations, Randy, have you received that?
Yes,
correspondence?
her resignation letter with the, her recommendations as far as moving forward. I think her recommendations did include the possible elimination of the deputy position moving forward, with the establishment of a director of patient services, upgrading that supervising person, and then removing that director of patient services from Carol's title. I think that essentially captures it. I mean, that is.
Is that the direction you think that you'll be going or recommending to the legislature?
I think it depends on if we so choose to post the position to external candidates in terms of Carol's position, or if we proceed, which is really a internal personnel matter. And but I mean, Carol's done the work. Carol understands and WIC is part of it, but WIC really, we have to make a decision, and the decision we make in WIC should not necessarily drive how we structure the department in the future.
Yeah, I also want to thank Carol Ryan. Even though she is retiring, she spent a lot of time with us. She made recommendations. I appreciate that.
And she gave us 90 to 120 days informal notice. It was last week. She put it in writing, and she did promise to come back to the committee meeting in July. And she struggled with the decision, and she did also promise to be a strong advocate in the community for public health.
Yeah, I too just want to recognize Carol's work. I mean, I've known her a number of years, and she's just one of the most dedicated public servants I've ever had the honor to work with. So, wish her all the best.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's no other questions, the item 2, economic development and impacts on social services. I am waiting for information from Carol Ryan, so I am going to discuss that next month. So we're going to move down into resolutions. We do have 2 resolutions. The Department of Community Services resolution. Number 1, agreement with Hudson Center for Health Equity and Quality for the Health Home Portal with the Department of Community Services.
Move it.
Jonathan.
Second.
Cindy.
Is there any discussion? Joe, you want to give us a little background?
Yeah, this is basically an agreement to allow us to participate in the, entering into a software agreement with a company. One of the things that's required under the Affordable Care Patient Protection Act is that health homes develop a way for electronic medical records to be shared between both health providers and behavioral health providers, as well as their care managers. We provide care management to both of the health homes that are in our region. This piece of software will allow us to enter into the software agreement that will allow us to look at permitted health information and allow us to develop care management plans with our care managers and their clients.
So I understand it's not mandated to have the software, and there is a county cost of $22,000. However, is this a requirement coming down now from the state? You're going to have more access to information.
Well, it's a requirement for health homes under the Affordable Care Act, and the state actually provided us with $30,000 last year to allow us to purchase either software like this or to develop it. So it's going to be 100% funded by the state.
And any other questions?
Today, the money's in our bank account.
Okay, so that 22 is going to be reimbursed, is that what you're saying?
Yep.
And so I'm assuming that because this was signed by Director of Purchasing, Kathy Jones, this did go through an RFP process?
No, this is a particular piece of software
What is
that
that
doesn't
one?
require it.
It says it's not.
Is it only one software provider for the whole state?
Well, for at least our health homes that we're dealing with, yes.
So currently, you don't share the information back and forth to the extent that's going to be required. So the software is going to provide that missing piece of information to the healthcare providers?
It will, but remember, we still have to be HIPAA compliant. So when we go up there and, try to pull data from the health provider, we have the client sign a release of information so that we are HIPAA compliant and we only see the data that they allow us to see.
Any other questions? Motion to approve?
We have a motion, second, Giselle.
All in favor? Any opposed?
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Okay, resolution number 2 from Department of Family Services to authorize county manager to enter into agreement with the Sullivan County Child Care Council for the provision of informal child daycare-related services.
Move it.
I have a couple of questions.
Second,
Just need a motion on it first.
discussion. Cora?
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. I'm sorry I didn't catch this earlier, but I'm not really clear on, there's no delineation of what those services are.
Well, I know it's a mandated service and there is no cost to the county, but maybe Commissioner Parker could explain.
The reason I'm asking is because I've had several calls, as everybody knows, from daycare providers who were concerned that their reimbursements, their invoices were in arrears. And when I had spoken to some people at the daycare council, if this is the same entity, they had actually offered to help the county. So is this a different entity?
We have two contracts. The Department of Family Services has two contracts with the local child care council. Mandated program and services, the two contracts, one of the contracts is a pass-through contract through the Department of Family Services, where they perform, and I have Joan Buttenhagen, our contract compliance specialist from the department, can explain it a whole lot better than I can, but one is for the information and referral aspect of the Child Care Council, and then the other is for the licensing and inspection. I'll let her differentiate. The second contract we have with them is an additional contract to that state pass-through. The Child Care program has, it's a tremendous program. It's very labor intensive. Our staffing, when the positions were held vacant, our child care staff positions, at one point we had 0 child care staff working. So there is a great degree of interface between the Child Care Council and our local staff. And there were processing of bills, payment issues at the time. There have been many meetings with the Child Care Council. Is it a program that's 100% resolved? And no, but it's a work in progress, and timeliness of payments has improved. And we're trying to reduce the number of steps in the process with the Child Care Council receiving bills. We're encouraging local providers to do an online bill submission rather than a paper submission. That's a work in progress, and educating providers as to how to do that. But I'm gonna just have Joan speak for a minute, just differentiating the two contracts.
Okay, before we do that though,
Okay.
I just want to clarify. When we spoke, it was with, Josh was in the conference room when I asked you to stop in.
Sure.
And the Child Care Council told me that they had offered to help, that and when I asked them specifically, how long does it take you to process the vouchers? They said they process about 300 and it takes 2 shifts of 7 hours each, so that they're done in, a 14-hour period.
For their staff.
Correct. And because I had asked, at that point, you had said, we don't really know if it would infringe on any union agreement. We don't really know if that's the road to go. Have you had any conversations with the unions with regard to the Child Care Council helping out as they offered?
No, I haven't had any discussion with
Then
them
that's good, okay.
about any privatization of.
Not privatization, but that the Child Care Council has this contract already, right?
Right, I mean, they have the contract, they provide a service, the second service, the payment, the billing, I mean, we're going to have to provide that service. But it's a complicated program. You have a large number of providers, you have billing, you know, there has been this different discussion in terms of the Child Care Council batching their billing, and when they batch the billing, we would like a more consistent, regular basis billing, so that we can stay, you know, on top of it regularly. We would like the providers to have a more predictable payment
Is that included in this contract that you're
expectation.
talking about?
Well, part of the issue with the contracts in general, and we have it in the division, is the 2 temporary extensions. That we had an extension initially at the beginning of the year through March 31st with all contracts, and then we have an extension through June 30th. Meanwhile, many programs and services, et cetera, were to be put out to bid. That I don't think, just because of volume, that has been able to be handled. This contract is one of many that still needs to be extended through the end of the year, but we are continuing to work with addendums, assuming this contract will be approved today, and work with addendums and processes and flows to this contract. Because it's just a contract that hasn't really been looked at over the years, that we're, you know, attempting to improve the communication between DFS and the Child Care Council, and benefiting the kids and the providers.
Are these services you're talking about going to put any of the union employees out of business? That's my question.
No, not the way that the contract is currently worded. And the issue was at the time when there was a freeze on the positions, and we were down 2 child care clerk staff in DFS. And
You don't have to go into detail. I just want to make sure
But
it's
the
not going to
detail
cause us
is-
to lose any employees.
No, I mean, these contracts will not eliminate any county jobs.
What we're looking for is more efficiency in the billing and payment system.
That's what they're working for, consistent billing.
Right,
So
so
what
I
you
think-
said, right, they're aware of it.
I think it would be helpful to have that kind of language written into any contract that's done, you know. Maybe Joan can address some of the more specifics. Thanks, Joan.
This resolution is for the informal, which is also known as the legally exempt childcare. And what it is the registration and referral contract, that's not this one, is state funded, but those are providers that the state oversees licenses, and the Sullivan County Child Care Council processes them and gets their information to the state and works with the state on them to get them licensed and monitored and provide the oversight. These are informal, that parents have an option, caregivers have an option to choose an informal, or they're also known as legally exempt, child care provider. And the Child Care Council is eligible to be the enrolling agency for them because they have a child care registration and referral contract with the state of New York for this region. So there's really no other eligible providers in this area.
It's not so much that, is that they're willing to help straighten out what's been an
Is that-
untimely.
Are you
issue.
talking about the CCTA program?
What I'm talking about is the time lag between the time that a daycare provider submits an invoice and the time that they're paid.
Right,
And
well,
the
to
child
my
care.
understanding,
Mhm.
the Child Care Council has been working with the department, and they set up a few new procedures that have been smoothing things out and speeding things up. So as far as I know, they have been working together.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Joan.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All in favor? All opposed?
3-0.
Thank you. Okay, there were no other reports from the departments on the agenda, so I'd like to move into public comment.
Before we do that, I do have one more question, but it's not referring to the last.
Yes, Mr. Benson.
I'd like to go back to the fraud investigation. I'm just curious, with the amount of is the amount that we're saving or recovering outweighing the costs of putting some of these offenders in jail? Is it costing us more to keep them in jail as opposed to what we're getting back?
Well, the cases are not done yet. The prosecution of the cases are not done. So we don't have amounts from those people that are either in jail or out on bail. You have to wait for the conclusion of those cases.
I just wanted to be,
There-
everybody to be mindful of the fact that I want to make sure that we're saving more than we're paying out.
Just for the record, there are a number of people that have called up and decided to repay their obligations because they're worried they're getting arrested.
And I think it, Gene, I think it's about a message that we're sending from the county.
Principle too.
Yeah, well, it's a great message that we're sending. I just want to make sure that the savings outweighs what it's costing us.
I mean, and as an example, right now, earlier in the 34 child support cases, and these are warrants out for arrest for, and each one is a dad, that total $1.4 million that they owe in arrears in child support. Much of that money is owed to mothers and their children. Now, some of that money is owed back to the county for services that we had to provide to the mother and children because this individual did not make their child support payments. We have 34 individuals, $1.4 million out there. There's nowhere near that Mr. Dietz's entire department comes near $1.4 million in expenditures. So, and it's the right thing to do. It's an individual's, a parent's responsibility to make payment and of their child support obligation. And these warrants, some of these warrants go back three years, 4 years, 34 individuals, and one individual in Mr. Dietz's work with the New York State Police was in the Bronx, was brought back and picked up, arrested from the Bronx, transported back to, I believe, Rockland County. Local state police met their folks from New York State Police and brought him back to Sullivan County. And so our message, and my message when I was hired, was eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse. Now, some of the folks that have come in and with the 21 arrests have been local child care provider arrested for fraudulent bill submission, a local resident claiming that their child is in child care, an individual attempting to sell their food stamp card for cash in a local grocery store, people working under the table not reporting their income, an individual having $16,000 at their disposal in their bank account and coming in saying they have no resources. I mean, we are not going to tolerate fraudulent activity coming into the Department of Family Services. One of the unintended consequences is folks who have been overpaid or received benefits have come in with cash to make payments in fear of possibly being arrested for being in possession of funds that they have no right to.
I think we're sending a great message. I'm not trying to put you on the defensive. I just want to make sure that it's not costing us more than we're saving or making. That's all I'm saying.
Okay,
I
thank
would
you,
say,
Gene.
even if, in the short run, even if it costs more, I think it's important. I think when you go 6 years and you don't prosecute anyone, you're basically sending a message out there. Go ahead, abuse the system,
Thank you.
ignore your kids,
And there was a 5-year period with 3 arrests. He's been on the job 60 days and there's 21 arrests, and he just turned over 20 more to local law enforcement.
Since the end of March.
It's important that we send that message.
Thank you. I'd like to move into public comment. Public shall be permitted to make a statement at any regular meeting of the legislature on any issue for a period of not more than 2 minutes at the discretion of the presiding officer, which I am the chair of Health and Family Services, so I am asking that if anyone would like to make a comment, that they keep it to 2 minutes. Thank you. Sandy?
Good afternoon. I just wanted to comment on some of the things that are going on here. I think it's great, the amount of arrests that have happened with the fraud in Sullivan County. I am concerned over a couple of comments even made by the legislators I heard from Mr. Parker that for 3 to 4 years, you know, there was no one going after the deadbeat dads. I applaud that that's happening. I'm just curious why 3 to 4 years nothing happened. Same thing, there was a comment made by Alan that for 6 years there were no arrests. The response back was that in a 5-year period there were 3. A lot of the cases that have come out in the news are very old. They're years and years and years old. Where were these, why wasn't anything being done? I think that many of the new legislators and some of the current legislators ran on the platform of accountability and transparency. And I'm curious why, you know, some things that are going on are continued to be overlooked. So that moves me into my next statement. I was interested to learn about the possible privatization of WIC. I believe that WIC is a fully funded program, so I believe that, you know, there is fully paid for by federal government, I believe, 100%. I'm gonna pass out a couple of things here. This is a resolution from the March meeting of Health and Family Services on page 1. Page 2, 3, and 4 are all documents that came from a presentation at the April Health and Family Services meeting. Oops. Basically, my question and my concern is this. For those of you that don't know, prior to this election, I asked a lot of questions on budgetary issues and some concerns that I felt were just needed clarification. This is another one of those clarification issues. Basically, in March of this year, a resolution was submitted to this legislature to enter into agreements with foster care providers. Back in January, I sent you, every legislator here, a copy of my concerns with the foster care program. This resolution is supposed to be entered into for a period of July of 2013 to June of 2014, yet the column for 2014 is not filled in at all. And the amounts listed for 2012 and 2013 are 75% less than your own presentation in April says you have.
Cindy, I have to ask you to wrap it up. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's
I'm
just the 2 minutes.
That's fine. I'm sure somebody will donate me their 2 minutes.
Thank you. I just do want to comment on the foster care in Sullivan County, if I may. I am a foster care mother as of the end of March. I was certified, I took the certification 4 years ago in Sullivan County. My paperwork could have been finished very quickly. I never got a call for a child in Sullivan County in 4 years. Where are the children? I received a child from another county and was told by the caseworkers there that they try not to utilize the boarding houses that we're contracting out, some of them $500,000, that these kids enter these boarding houses and some of them stay there for a year, 2 years. My little boy is 7 years old, he's in first grade. I was told that if I was not contacted for this child, he would have gone from Children's Hospital in Binghamton to a boarding house, much as the ones we contract with. And I feel that we need to work harder at getting the foster care homes filled. I took the class with 8 to 10 other families. I've run into several of them over the 4 years. None of them have received children either. So I think that the foster care program needs to be looked at and possibly reformed in Sullivan County and modeled after other counties that move these children into homes. Thank you.
Liz, you had your hand up.
This is kind of an exercise in how many questions can you get on the head of a pin. I've got mine down to 6. The first one is, Mrs. Geiger and other legislators, or any of you asked by the Sullivan County Attorney to not speak to or elaborate on issues or concerns surrounding Dr. David Sager's termination? If so, what did the county attorney ask you not to mention? Will each of the legislators present today say today whether or not you knew of Commissioner Parker's plan to terminate Dr. Sager before it occurred? If you did, for what reason or reasons did you keep that knowledge from other legislators? Will you address the current lack of structures and procedures by which conscientious employees can report department-related concerns to the legislature? And will you commit to an immediate investigation of the circumstances surrounding Dr. Sager's termination? And I'd love to, cede my 2 minutes to anybody who wants to answer any of these questions.
I'll comment on that, because I know there's a lot of people here that are addressing this personnel issue. I was not aware that the termination of Deputy Sager was to take place. There was a meeting prior to the day before. I was not aware. I have to say the county attorney did not tell me not to speak to anyone about it. I found out by a text message that I got. I was shocked, to say the least. Currently, what I'm doing is trying to review personnel policy in Sullivan County. We had a discussion about it earlier today. Our county policy has categories, deals with categories of employees: union, non-union, management, at-will employees. Deputy Sager was an at-will employee. Our county policy, from what I can tell, there's a gray area. For union, for other employees, we have it in writing, the procedure that we follow. My questions revolve around the fact that an at-will employee, there's no statement of policy written down to follow. So how are these decisions being made? I still have questions. I'm still reviewing the gray area of the personnel policy, and absolutely moving forward, that needs to be looked at and changed so that this doesn't happen again.
If I could just respond, in fact, in federal law and in New York State law, at-will employees can be fired for no reason. You don't like me, I'm an at-will employee, you can fire me. What you cannot do is terminate me for an illegal reason. If, for instance, I was a member of DFS, I was an employee in DFS, or I was a former deputy clerk in the county of Sullivan, if I believe that you have fired me for sexual harassment causes, for retaliation reasons, I have a legal recourse through both the federal and state courts to say to you, there are rules regarding whether or not you fire an at-will employee for illegal reasons. And that's something that has been raised at the Labor Subcommittee meeting, which Legislator Benson called. I really think it's time for the legislators to understand that you cannot illegally fire an at-will employee by federal and state law.
Jonathan?
Good afternoon, Jonathan Hyman, Smallwood. I have a more general comment that I hadn't intended to make until just 2 minutes ago. This is just basically a more generic comment about government. I just witnessed something that just to me is disturbing, and my comment is meant to be made as a friend of the legislature. I have over the years testified many times at public hearings, made preparations for public hearings, helped other people prepare for public hearings and or public comment. The heart of good government is to be present and or to participate when citizens interact with their government. Very often, somebody will make a presentation, it could be a well-known person, it could be somebody who nobody knows, and they're told after 2 minutes, thank you very much, sit down. I hope in the future when a person, whether they're well-known or not, or somebody who has something substantive to say, is given the leeway to continue what they're saying. I sat for over an hour and 15 minutes and really appreciated the way in which I really appreciated the way in which I was able to watch the way you did business. I often don't come to this meeting. And so again, I say this as a friend of the legislature. It's disturbing to me and unfortunate that someone who's got paperwork in front of them, who's got something substantive to say, who's a well-respected person is told, sit down, that's enough.
I would like to respond to that. I did not tell Sandy, I told her to please wrap it up. We have a veterans meeting at 1 o'clock. This agenda, normally, I can keep it contained in 1 hour, and it's almost 1 o'clock. So the agenda was very long, and I'm willing to give everybody 2 minutes to respond, a public comment.
Cindy, I like and respect you very much. I'll stand by my comments, but let's let it go.
Well, actually, we would be able to call Sandy back up, because I think, I've asked questions, I've asked Josh to provide what were the actual costs of foster care for the last 5 years, and if she can give us a quick, concise answer, I think we all on the legislature.
Okay, I'm going to continue with Ira Cohen. You had your hand up. Sandy, I'll give you that opportunity if we have time. I see other hands.
Thank you. I just have 2 comments. You had asked earlier during the presentation on the early intervention program about the regarding the Department of Health's takeover and what fiscal control that left us with. There was prior to April, an escrow agreement that was being circulated by the Department of Health, I believe through NISAC. We were asked to comment on that. I did submit comments. I don't think the Department of Health had any intention of making any amendments to their escrow agreement and didn't. So I do have some concerns about that. But that escrow agreement does set forth a detailed protocol for fiscal control and reimbursement and expense that we have little control over, in my opinion. But I do have a copy and can make it available to you.
Okay, would you get that to us,
Sure.
Ira?
The second thing is Commissioner Parker spoke about this program about trying to reduce county expenses by providing some housing and some of which, we've offered to have him look at, the properties we take every year in tax foreclosure. And there's been many discussions throughout the year about this, and I'd hate to see it slip through the cracks at the last minute. Commissioner Parker, as he indicated, has identified one particular house. This was discussed 2 days ago at the Real Property Advisory Board meeting. And we're all in favor of pulling this or recommending that the legislature pull it from the auction so that it can be used by, for this purpose by Health and Family Services. But the discussion was that we were waiting, or the commissioner was waiting for a structural report from DPW, which apparently we didn't have yet. And 2, and maybe more importantly, generally speaking, a protocol and commitment for maintenance and administration if we undertake this responsibility ourselves now, to make sure that if we're going to own the property and keep the property, that it get maintained. So the recommendation of the advisory board was that this property is still in the auction, which is going to start a week from today. So, like I say, I'd hate to see it slip through the crack. I'd like to see, make sure that there's a commitment to doing this, even though there may be some related county expense and maintenance in the future, because we're more than happy to pull it from the auction for this purpose.
Okay, can we get DPW at the table to discuss that? Randy, do that.
Cindy, I've already communicated with Ed McAndrew yesterday with Randy, so he's working on that, and we'll have some figures.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the recommendation. Okay, there was a lady with the orange shirt.
Good afternoon. Pardon my voice, it's a little raspy. I'm here from Sullivan County, chapter of the NAACP, and I have a letter addressed to the Sullivan County legislators and Sullivan County and the Sullivan County Freedom of Information Act compliance officer. Our organization has had for many years serious concerns in the professional conduct, competence, and due diligence to the Sullivan County Department of Family Services. Therefore, The Sullivan County chapter of the NAACP would like to assert its rights under the Federal Freedom and Information Act. Out of grave concern for the children and families throughout Sullivan County, especially those in the minority population and or those underprivileged, we are submitting this letter not only as a public statement, but also as a FOIA request to obtain all child protective services, DFS legal service abuse and neglect petition filed in the past year in Sullivan County Family Court. We believe the current effort on the part of an overworked and understaffed CPS staff are simply not sufficient. The protection we expect and deserve for our children and families have been short-circuited by what we can only describe as a cavalier and disengaged DFS legal department. In short, more than ever, our most at-risk children are at even greater risk. The Sullivan County chapter of the NAACP would also like to state that it is extremely disturbed by the sudden and unexplained termination of Deputy Commissioner Sager. We believe it is unexpected departure needs to be publicly accounted for by those in power with Sullivan County government. Based on what we have seen to date of Commissioner Parker's leadership, we are very concerned. It appears that Mr. Parker's aggressive behavior and reckless policy will go unchecked without the benefit of Dr. Saber's sound reasoning as part of the management team and the Department of Family Services. We look forward to receiving the fall documents and fully expect to hear from you in the very near future with legitimate and an explanation as to why Dr. Saber no longer works at the Department of Family Services. I need to submit this. Thank you.
I'd like, Liz, if you could give me a copy of your questions, because I'd like to be able to answer them in a more, thoughtful manner. I know there were about 6 questions you boiled it down to, and I think they deserve to be responded to.
I didn't get find them at the moment.
Okay.
I really can't.
That's okay, but
Like
as
my
long as
brain.
you can give them to me, and then I'll be able to go through them.
Is your email online? I can.
All our emails are online.
All right, cool.
Yes, somebody has their hand up, Sandy Oxford. Anyone else that didn't get 2 minutes, make sure I see your hand.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad that we're going to get some answers to the 6 questions, because I think they're really important. There are over 500 signatures in the community in support of Dr. David Sager. Many of us believe that Dr. Sager was doing an excellent job in his capacity as Deputy Commissioner. We believe his unexpected departure needs to be publicly accounted for by those in power within the Sullivan County government. We knew that we had a friend in Dr. Sager who was both professional and approachable. Without him as part of the management team at the Department of Family Services, I am very concerned about the aggressive and what I will say reckless, because with the plan for WIC, I think that that is absolutely reckless, and I want somebody to correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is WIC is one of those departments and jobs that are 100% fully funded. So for us to eliminate county jobs here, where it's an absolute pass-through through the federal government, to privatize them and to loop water down those jobs is unacceptable and reckless. Thank you.
My question to you is, when you spoke about Dr. Sager.
Excuse me, can you please state your name?
Oh, Ellen Newman. When you spoke about Dr. Sager being terminated and you, Ms. Geiger, weren't aware of it until after that, Liz had asked a question. Those of you who were aware, what were you told to say by the attorney, or what were you told not to say? Ms. Geiger has given her answer, and we'd like to know what the rest of you who were privy to that meeting and what did you know and what do we not know?
Well, I can tell you, for me, I was not aware of it. I found out from somebody later on that evening when I was home. I found out at about 5:30 that evening. I had no clue.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to be on the record that I had absolutely no clue that that was going to happen.
How does this happen?
Okay.
Stay here.
No clue, no clue. So wasn't there some kind of law that, wasn't there, someone in the legislature must have been aware? And if that's true, and not one of you knew, where could the legality be?
I can tell you that we were not aware. There
I
was a
believe
meeting
you. I
before that
believe
we
you
were
for a
not
second.
told of the termination.
But should you not have been aware?
I feel that we should have.
I do too, and I think the rest of us do too.
You're here.
We absolutely do. We feel this great unfairness here. And there should be an investigation. What do I know? Or you, because none of us know a thing. But there should be an investigation made, and we want to know why Dr. Sager was let go, and if there was a good reason. And if there wasn't a good reason, keep in mind, we have to pay to train someone new, to get someone new started, and this is going to cost the county of Sullivan money just to get a new man in when we had a good man to start with. So let's expect.
Canadian in the front row.
No disrespect to anyone, I have to apologize to my Veterans Committee.
So I'll take a few more, and then we do have the meeting at 1 o'clock.
I will be quick because I didn't intend to speak at all, but I'm speaking only as a tax-paying member of Sullivan County. I've lived here my entire life, and that's 65 years as of yesterday. And I'm here as a mother because I'm David's mother. I listened to everybody talk about Mr. Parker, was it? Randy? I listened to Randy speak about the importance of, he was told to eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse. I heard people talk about accountability and transparency. I've heard everybody come up with proposals for adult care, homeless care, veterans, caring for the veterans, which is all very, very important. The homeless, the aging, and children from birth to 3 years. And your comments were all so rational and so deserving. However, the comment was made by Randy that Carol Ryan gave normal notice. Did you do the same of the right thing to do? I think it's time to go back to accountability and transparency, and everybody, whether you knew or not about what was about to happen, if you're not part of the cure, you're part of the problem. Thank you.
Anyone else? And then I'll give Sandy a few minutes. Anyone else? Okay, Sandy?
Thank you, and thank you. The part that I have a question on is where $4 million went. The resolution attached, which in April was tabled by this full board and was subsequently untabled, was tabled in March and subsequently untabled in April, was not amended. The presentation in April states that there was in excess of $8 million in contract, exceeding the budgeted amount of $5 million. The resolution does not show a $5 million amount to be budgeted. Not in 2012, not in 2013, despite what the presentation shows. I foiled a lot of information to find out how much the costs are for foster care, and they almost hit the budget every year. So where did the $4 million missing expense go? That expense is children. There are no programs in place in the county, which is why many of these kids are placed outside of the county in these facilities. So I'm curious to know where that expense went, and I think as our legislators, you have to be asking that question. It's $4 million. When and if that money doesn't get appropriated, what's going to be said is that the budget is broken and we need to lay people off. That's my concern. Where is the money? Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. If there's no other questions, thank you all for coming. Motion to adjourn. Second? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm busy, sorry.
I just wanted to